Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you all for joining us at the 12th edition of the Spain Investors Day. We welcome you on behalf of Estudio de Comunicación, our partners BNP Paribas and BNP Paribas Exane, our sponsors Endesa, Deloitte, CaixaBank, Prisa, BME, AON, and our collaborators Equipo Económico, Linklaters, ICEX, ICO, and Cofides. We want to especially thank and welcome the Vice President and Minister for Ecological Transition and Demographic Challenge, Teresa Ribera. I now give the floor to the Chairman of Endesa, Mr. José Bogas.
Good afternoon and greeting to the fourth Vice President and Minister of Ecological Transition and Demographic Challenge, members of the Governing Board of Spain Investor Day, Chairman of Spain Investor Day, and all those who are following us in person or virtually. I would like to thank you once again for your attendance at this event. This new edition begins as we are about to celebrate 2 years of global pandemic. This is an unprecedented situation for everyone that is putting our capabilities under severe strain, making us review our forecast and having an impact on business, social and family life throughout the world. Even so, we have to carry on. The fact is we are all continuing to work with the aim of doing things better, of exceeding our own forecast and learning from that situation. Spain Investor Day brings us together once again and gives us the opportunity to explain why Spain is an attractive country to investor, a country that is worthwhile and a country full of opportunities. And many of these opportunities are in the energy sector. While it is true that energy transition will undergo moments of stress, such as those we have been experiencing for months, it is also true that it is essential to promote investment plans to change the energy model. This energy model will be essentially electric in the future, affordable, with reasonable prices for customers and based on clean energy. In that context, it is an honor for me to present today Teresa Ribera, as I have said, for Vice President and Minister of Ecological Transition and Demographic Challenges. Vice President, 2021 was a very complicated year, and 2022 seems to be fraught with challenges and problems, but also, I think, opportunities that we must take advantage of. You have a huge responsibility to create the right framework to accelerate energy transition, a transition that is absolutely vital for good economic performance and to secure the future of our planet, threatened as never before by the perverse effects of climate change and the loss of biodiversity. Here should stress the enormous importance of public and private collaboration in this moment in time. A collaboration and dialogue that are both essential to overcome the price problems arising from the rise of the price of gas and CO2. Beyond this, I would like to say temporary and limited circumstances, I would like to highlight the importance of the measures adopted since 2018 by the cabinet that Teresa Ribera directs. Key measures to ensure that the energy transition comes to fruition. Last year, at this same event, I summarized the main laws and measures promoted by your ministry. Leaving aside, for the moment, the stress we are experiencing as a result of wholesale prices, I would like to underline and highlight the success of all these measures. I would also like to say that they still need further development, and new measures are required for that favor investment. All these will be required to meet the goals for decarbonization and the deployment of renewable energies that we have all set, and for us to achieve an electrified future. I would like to share a number of very brief facts with you. According to the latest forecast from the most important agencies, I'm talking about the International Energy Agency, the International Renewables Energy Agency, and Bloomberg New Energy Finance, it will be necessary just to electrify at least 50% of the processes by 2050 if we are to meet the goals of net zero emission. This means that by 2050 we will need 24,000 terawatt-hours of additional clean energy production. In other words, installed renewables capacity on a global scale need to grow more than 5 times compared to 2019. And Spain has to be a key country to reach this goal. Dear Vice President, dear Teresa, our dialogue will continue as always, and hopefully over the years, when we look back, we can say that we did the right things through dialogue and collaboration. The stage is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon. It is my great pleasure to be here again with you all. Thanks, Pepe, for your comments, your introductory comments. Thanks for the invitation. And thanks to you all for being here, confirming once again your interest, also your commitment to make a much more healthy, environmentally sound, and socially viable Spain prosperous future. I think that the first thing to say is that yesterday we read once again the Global Risk Report being issued by the World Economic Forum. And again, climate failure was among the highest, the hottest reference on why there may be an additional attention coming from every single institution in the world to avoid any kind of economic and social turbulence in the global economic situation. Together with that, the weather disasters or the social difficulties, the social differences, so the gap between the coherence that we all need to reinforce at the different levels of the society after such a dramatic crisis we have been living during the last 2 years, and the health concerns were among the most important references being used by the World Economic Forum. My first comment, my first strong statement is that we do not want to fail, and we do want to count on you So to make this possible, to make this big transformation that we need to put in place to address in a socially, economic, and environmentally sound manner as soon as possible a reality in our country. And I think that there are many things that we have learned since we last saw each other last year that should be references to pay attention to, so to ensure that this goes smoothly into the right direction. I think that now we have a clear common willingness of recovery all over the country, all over the countries, I would say, a recovery grounded in the solid foundations of the plan, in our case, we launched in Spain last year. So something that needs to be green, digital and social coherence, social cohesion as main drivers of this transformation. If we do not count on people, people would not back the transformation. So this is very important in this point in time. A better understanding of the vulnerabilities of the global value chains and the volatility of prices dealing with scarce, commonly demanded goods and raw materials have also arisen as key references to be taken into consideration, something that sounded very important and a strong reference in the macroeconomic assessment now becomes something to pay attention to in a much more detailed manner. So how we can be more resilient, probably resilience is the word of the year, so something to be very attentive to. More than ever, lasting business opportunities and a strong and sustainable economic prosperity is tied to social equity and environmentally sound prosperity. And I think that we have a lot of things we have learned along the last years, so much more common ground to facilitate our pathways towards this journey that we need to play, to enjoy together. An effective strategy for a green and fair recovery requires public policies and a clear, stable, predictable, and consistent policy framework. But it also needs pathways to attract investment and innovation, and committed investors and committed social players willing to make their share in this transformation. So we know that we need to pay attention to risk management, including transport and logistics, the disruption of global balances, so geopolitical tensions that may come up in different places of the world, and now we are experiencing some of them, the need to secure basic goods. We have experienced this in a very basic set of goods, such as health supplies, and the dependence and the scarcity of essential supplies and raw materials for industry, as I have just commented, that become increasingly relevant. But we also need to pay attention to new consumer preferences, so valuing cost beyond just economic ones as something to be taken into consideration, and the growing weight of responsible investors who demand sustainability, social, environmental governance, ESG investment as a clear way to provide in the mainstream understanding of what does it mean sound investment in the years to come. Processes, services, and goods are key factors that we need to take into consideration when dealing with these issues. And Spain is committed to this green prosperity. As I said, we do not want to fail, and we see this as a great opportunity to modernize, to update, to innovate, to orientate where we want to make additional benefits for the whole economic and the society, but at the same time, how we can position ourselves in a context where we need to be much more resilient, as I said, and with a much more long-lasting perspective of what is worthy, what it is important for people. And I think that we are in the right place in the world to do so. For many reasons, I think that the European and Spanish economies go along these lines in a very clear manner, even if we know that the transformation may provide difficult situations, may provide situations that are not expected, that need to be assessed and responded in a consistent and responsible manner. Green investments are also a source of new high-quality employment, something which is important in any society and, of course, in the Spanish one as well. It is an essential factor for recovery. It is an essential factor for counting on the society backing the transformation. So, skilling and reskilling, anticipating where the labor needs may be and what additional skills may be necessary is very important. So to avoid the difficulties to provide these social labor forces there where we need that we can take new economic business opportunities and social opportunities in the time to come. So the bold answer to the current challenges is to ensure a quicker and fair transition. There is no doubt that this is the direction we need to stress, and there is no doubt on the need to accelerate what it is already in place. We need to focus on accelerating the deployment of already known green technologies, as well as to pave the way to open the door to the next generation of these type of technologies. Both things are needed, and both things need to be strengthened in the time to come. A green transition that needs to be supported by the efficient circular use of materials, energy, water and soil, a massive deployment of renewable energy solutions, digitalization, full use of opportunities in other sectors than energy, but that do relate very closely to the energy sector, such as housing, mobility, retrofitting and urban renovation, resilience of infrastructures, digitalization of water management, and so on and so on. An opportunity that has to be widespread and accessible to each investor, company or worker in any region or territory who is willing to participate. And this is also very important, and this also changes and challenges the way we have understood governance of decisions, governance of investments, paying attention to people, paying attention to the local circumstances, understanding the local context, understanding the global trends. Aligning with the new European industrial strategy, we want to improve our availability to innovate and produce in strategic areas, as well as to have reliable partners along the value chains to contribute to having a carbon-neutral economy. We think that maybe I made this joke last year. This is not only an issue of green electrons or green molecules. This is an issue that roots into the very elementary, very primary industrial solutions and goes beyond the services and the full understanding of welfare in our societies. And on energy, we expect to drastically reduce our dependence on foreign fossil fuels, which we currently import up to 100% of what we consume. But we don't want to change dependence on raw materials by dependencies on technology and innovation. To the extent possible, we want to root, we want to build this as an opportunity to ensure a grounded local capacity to fully benefit of the new economy. This transformation requires the commitment of the government, but as I say, entrepreneurs, investors, civil society, workers, citizens, understanding the whole complex reality is very important that find a way to be involved. Thus, it is so important to pay attention to the impacts on those most vulnerable that may be increasingly reluctant if they don't benefit from the benefits of this transformation. Social measures, solidarity, paying attention to the impacts and unequal impacts of the transformation in the transformation times is also part of our responsibility, and it is also part of our response. To boost investments and the required reforms, up to 140 billion euros in transfers and credits coming from the Next Generation funds are going to be available to Spain between 2021 and 2026. From the public sector, we have started to apply a massive public investment program that also aims to mobilize private investments in key areas, such as those included on what we call the ecological transition. 40% of the 70 billion euros in transfers are assigned to the green transition, so a big share. And 100% of the investments are subject to the do not significant harm principle. And we are trying to be very honest, but also very exigent on this, the appliance of this principle. With this unprecedented level of resources, Spain is deploying an ambitious program of modernization similar to what we did when joining the European communities in 1986. We think that this is once in a life opportunity that we need to benefit and we need to care to take with, as I said, full responsibility, but also with the wisest manner to invest this funding. We have played the role in a very similar way in the different chapters of this recovery plan. We understand that we need to have to share and to design together with the different players in the society the main references in the strategic frameworks, and then to go into the regulation and go into the fair manner to apply to invest these resources. In the context of the framing strategies, Pepe has introduced some comments about them: the Integrated National Plan of Energy and Climate up to 2030, the new Climate Change and Energy Transition Law, the National Strategy for Green Infrastructure, Ecological Connectivity and Restoration of Ecosystems, the third cycle set of water management plans, which is about to be approved this year, the 2030 Spanish Strategy for a Circular Economy, the Circular Economy and Waste Management Law, about to be approved by the Senate, are some of the key regulatory and strategic references. Together, when paying attention, when focusing on the energy sector, with some concrete references that I will mention, such as the hydrogen roadmap, the offshore wind power industry roadmap, the energy storage strategy, the self-consumption strategy, the digitalization of the grids strategy, and then all of them available in the ministry websites. The Ministry for the Ecological Transition will directly manage for more than 15 billion euros in 2.5 years period of time. Almost 7 billion euros, 6.8 million, were successfully executed or transferred in accordance with the program, with the investment program, up to the end of December of last year. So a big challenge in terms of administrative management that has been successfully delivered. So more than 95% of the budgeted funding has already been managed by the ministry in this last exercise. In 2022, we have been allocated more than 13 billion euros for research and development and innovation and digitalization, 2.9 billion euros for the energy transition, 1.2 billion to resilient infrastructures and ecosystems, and 0.3 to circular economy. Again, more than 4.5 billions that we will allocate along the year. We need to build a solid and strong collaborative public-private networks for innovation to ensure that this money is fully invested in the wisest, in the most intelligent manner, as I have just said before. But we have had a great response. I would say that it is with great satisfaction that we have seen the type of responses we have got from the community in general terms when asking for expressions of interest on almost every single file that we have tried to push forward during the last years. The response has been enormous in quantity and enormous in quality. Quite wide, quite varied, and quite interesting, showing that we are in a country that is mature and is willing to face this change and is willing to take full advantage of the opportunities that this big transformation implies for ourselves. We have shaped also a new reference, a new concept that it has maybe introduced by my colleague, the Minister of Industry, Tourism and Trade, the new strategic projects for economic recovery and transformation, the PERTES, trying to show the flagships in some of the fields where we think that we have a great opportunity to modernize the economy. The electric and connected electric vehicle, PERTE, will mobilize 24 billion euros, as he has probably commented this morning. The renewable energies, hydrogen and storage, PERTE, will mobilize 16 billion euros, and we have just approved it at the end of the last year. We are still working on our next strategic projects to be approved in this area, including a PERTE for the digitalization of the water sector and another one on the circular economy. Both key references to accelerate the transformation on the way we produce and we consume. We are driving a major transformation of the Spanish energy system. That's sure. That's the goal. And sometimes the pathways are clear, and sometimes it becomes a little bit more difficult. We know that we need to achieve at least 74% of renewable energy in the electricity sector by 2030, and 42% of final use of energy being decarbonized by 2032. The transformation will affect the way energy is produced and consumed, resulting in a 100% renewable, open, distributed, multidirectional, democratized, flexible, and intelligent new energy system. So many more players, much more, a little bit more of complication, very well managed by our grid operator, but certainly full of new opportunities and new business case that deserve attention and investment from your side. To move this transformation, our plan, our recovery plan, will devote more than 10.7 billion in transfers, 70% of the funds managed by the ministry. The distribution of these funds in major components is the following one. 2 billion euros on sustainable, safe and connected mobility, urban and metropolitan, 1.3 billion euros on housing retrofitting and urban regeneration, 3.16 billion euros on renewable energy development plans, 1.36 billion euros on electricity infrastructures, smart grids and storage, a key word in our case, storage. We want to lead the storage to provide soundness to our system. 1.3 billion euros in just transition strategies is key for workers, apart from being key for consumers. 1.55 billion euros on the hydrogen roadmap. 1.07 billion euros in modernization of the public administration in terms of energy consumption. Last December, as I said, we approved the PERTE for renewable energies, renewable hydrogen and storage. This PERTE intends to mobilize 16.37 billion euros, of which 6.92 come from the plan and more than 9.45 will be coming from private investment. So we need you. We think that investment on technology, knowledge, industrial capabilities and new business models will be developed in our country in order to become a technological reference in the production and use of renewable energy, to develop our own capacity to store and manage an intelligent demand of the energy sector, to promote renewable energy value chains, especially offshore wind energy, floating offshore wind energy, and to encourage social and business model innovation, in particular promoting local energy communities and making full use of the capacity, the capillary capacity, to accelerate the relation between private citizens, small companies with the energy production and consumption. This PERTE consists of 25 transformative measures supported with 3.56 billion euros of public investment, 17 facilitating measures that will count on 3.36 billion for the energy transition, and we also want to develop a next-gen energy sale so that we can recognize those projects that do include different references and provide a comprehensive approach to this energy transformation with dealing with their relation with energy. Our recovery plan also includes reforms and investments in sustainable cities and mobility. A central part of this plan will include an acceleration of the electric mobility. And again, here I see that many different partnerships are being grounded, are being shaped about different players in the private sector, and we want to support this acceleration of the transformation, both from the industrial perspective and energy perspective, but also from the cultural change that we still need to provide confidence to any user willing to make a different option when dealing with mobility. The MOVES, so dealing with the electric mobility, has devoted 800 billion euros to electric mobility, including the deployment of more than 100,000 new researching points by 2023, and a rapid penetration of e-vehicles in the Spanish fleet, including a 100 million euros to support the research, development and innovation in the new process, so to facilitate new model prototypes and new components of electric vehicles. Similar approach with housing rehabilitation, so to make full use of the renovation wave being stated by the European authorities, the European institutions, and special attention to the small towns and small villages, so that those citizens that live in rural areas do not understand this transformation as something that only applies to big industries, big companies, or big cities, but that also benefits the well-being in rural areas and small towns. So a program has been devoted for the urban sustainable solutions in small cities that counts on more than 325 million euros when dealing with energy efficiency and restoration. Some comments to be made on circularity as one of the pillars of the Spanish plan for recovery, with much interest coming from the different industrial sectors. I think that this needs to go beyond the traditional perspective of waste management and needs to be crafted in a way that the textile industry, the construction, the agriculture, the livestock, the water management, the renewable energy equipments, the steel and aluminium, do also introduce and advance at a high speed in this area. We want to give a strong impetus to the transformation of our production model. So a big amount of this recovery plan will also go to the Spanish circular economy strategy, providing, improving the eco-design, the reuse of recycling and recovery, and to incorporate and increase the digitalization, so to facilitate the full use of these opportunities. Resilient infrastructures and ecosystems is key. That is where we are going to place our capacity to keep on going in the time to come. It goes beyond the protected areas, but it needs to be also the main lines to provide resilience to climate change impacts, but also to facilitate the long-standing standards that we still think that need to benefit the generations to come. Spain is a precious, delicate and fragile environmental asset that needs if there is a precious, delicate, fragile environmental asset in our country, is water. So water management is key. And it is key from this perspective of the planning of these assets, but it is also key from the perspective of the management, better understanding, better knowledge, better preparedness, so to face stress water moments, either because there is a situation of floods or because there is a situation of droughts. So water being a key resource, we need to invest to digitalize the whole management of the water resources in the urban space, but also in the final use in the industry or the agriculture sector. A comprehensive knowledge of the uses of water, an immediate understanding on whether there may be a lack of efficiency, a leakage, or a problem of pollution, but also learn how we can improve a better use of our research is absolutely key. So the big data techniques, the digital resources, the smart meters, a cybersecurity plan in the management of the resource of this resource is also a reference in our recovery plan, with more than 500 million euros in 2022 for the financing of this project, and with an estimated total budget of more than 3,000 million euros up to 2026. But I could say that we are still learning, as you are also learning. And I think that we need tools to facilitate this learning process. And this is why we are big supporters of this discussion on whether we may need green taxonomy to facilitate clarity on where it makes more sense to invest, not to waste money, not to waste resources, but also to accelerate the capacity of transformation. And the European taxonomy is one such a tool, translating the climate and environmental objectives into clear criteria that can be measurable and comparable wherever. So to create a common language around green activities, a frame of reference for investors and companies that ensure that no significant harm, so lowering the risk for whoever wants to invest in this field, and facilitate a faster decarbonization of our economies, as we tried to do when issuing our green bond last year. The transformation we have put in motion requires a massive mobilization of funds, a full commitment of investors, not only because it is a mission of our generation, it is also something that makes sense, makes business sense, and it makes profits whenever it is properly managed. So the public sector may drive the direction, but nothing can be done without the private investment and the full conviction and support of the citizens. We count on you, and we intend not to fail. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. We're now opening the turn for questions from international investors participating in this event. The first one goes like this. In May 2021, Spain's new law on climate change and energy transition came into force. Spain has committed to reduce emissions by 23% and generate 74% of the country's electricity from renewable sources by 2030. The law also brings Spain in line with the European Union's goal to become carbon neutral by 2050. What measures is the government going to apply to meet these objectives, guaranteeing the grid stability and the competitiveness of Spanish companies?
Thank you. Thank you so much for the question. I could say that dealing with the grid stability, we count on a very sound manager of our national grid, whose main responsible is here. And I think that, of course, this is key. The easiest way to manage the stability of the grid, the traditional easiest way to manage the stability of the grid, was simple, and it counted on 15, 20, 30 big plants, and that's all, and it was more or less stable and unable to be regulated. Now it is a little bit more complicated. There are many more players, and we need to pay attention to all those players. The demand and the offer may change depending on the days, depending on the climate, and this needs to be much more smart. This is why we need to pay attention to the digitalization of the grid. This is why we need to pay attention to the grid. This is why we need to invest in storage. So to provide the other flexibility tools that we may be missing when changing the technologies that we have managed up to now. And I'm very confident on the capacity to do so. It is not just because there is a big amount of money being dedicated to this goal, but also because there is a deep understanding coming from the different players and a traditional, very sound management from our operator. With the other part of the question, I could say that what we are witnessing is something that is relevant and should deserve much more attention. I think that we are witnessing some changes on some turmoils in terms of how the electricity prices are being affected by the gas prices, or the volatility of these commodities in the international markets that do impact because of the regulatory design of the market of the electricity in Europe into the final prices in the electricity market. And I think that we need to pay attention to this fact. Of course, the main response is go faster. avoid this volatility by reducing your exposure to this volatility. But it also needs to be taken into consideration when thinking how this can evolve in the time to come, how at the national level we need to pay attention to these impacts in the society or in the industry, but also at the European level on what does this mean in terms of the European economy and to what extent this can last more than expected. So how we can accelerate at the European level or how there may be exceptional measures at the European level. And I think that this is part of the debate that we are still in the midst of it. And I think that we will have to pay attention from the different perspectives. But I insist on the fact that it could be very difficult to go along these lines if the final consumers, the final customers do not feel that this is something that is positive for them. So we need to ensure that this is perceived in this very same sense. And I think that there are strong sensibility coming from all the different governments and, of course, coming from the different industrial associations.
Thank you very much. The second question is related to a subject that you have mentioned. It goes like this. The European Commission is expected to announce this month its decision regarding the potential inclusion of natural gas and nuclear energy in the EU green taxonomy. Spain was officially disagreeing with this inclusion. Would you say this extension puts the EU decarbonization strategy at risk? Do you believe it will reorientate private capital flows towards more sustainable activities?
I don't think that this could derail what we are doing, but I think that we should facilitate to the extent possible what we are doing and to avoid making mistakes or providing confusing signals. And I think that what we have seen on the table coming from the Commission of Experts on Sustainable Finance was very sound, and it was work in a very open and sound manner for a very long time. So I think that we need to pay attention to what, in addition, we don't know to what extent within its own mandate, the Commission includes in this list. Because it is true that we may need many technologies in the bridging time, in the transition time. It is also true that what it was intended to do is to provide some clear understanding on what is beyond risk to facilitate this decarbonization. This doesn't mean that we cannot invest in what it already exists and what it may be needed still for a while. But that provides some additional signals that should be preserved. And policy coherence, credibility is important. If we start to water down a little bit these provisions, we may risk to have many different references, not just the European reference for all, but national references. I said when we issued our green bond, we follow the recommendations of the Sustainable Finance Committee. And there were things that have appeared later on because of the needs of some countries that may be needed for a while, but they also mean investments in the long run. So for whenever they are fully operational, we may be closer to this fully decarbonized horizon that we have stated as an objective for ourselves in Europe in 2050. This is why I'm not surprised by the fact that we hear voices from the investment community asking to the European Commission to take this with consideration this approach, because understanding gas as a compatible technology with the decarbonization is a little bit risky, for instance, or understanding some technologies beyond a reference to transitional technologies may be risky too. So yes, we will be working to try to stay to the extent possible to what it has already been available and discussed and supported by the experts, and we will be, of course, in a position to pay attention to any other additional comment or to take into consideration whether we may need to identify what we understand by green sustainable investment. But I don't think that this could derail this European strategy. I think that the European commitment to the full decarbonization of the economy is sincere. We may find difficulties trying to approach our positions, our national circumstances, and so on, but the commitment is very firm. So, to the extent possible, it's better to be bold, clear, and to be united, and to save resources to the main priorities. But I don't fear this as a yes or no issue.
Thank you very much. Okay, there are several questions regarding the same topic, so I'm going to read just one of them. Energy prices have been rising steadily in recent months across Europe and Spain. In Spain, it has generated social debate and has affected the operating costs of regular businesses. Does the government plan to intervene in price or limit price escalation in any way? Do you think the rise in energy prices could affect the competitiveness of Spanish companies?
I think the rise of energy prices in Europe could affect the competitiveness of European industry. And I wonder to what extent this huge price that we are witnessing, and of course it's not that this huge price in the pool, in the market, do go directly into the bill of the households or the bills of the industry. That's for sure. But in the midterm, this is the reference that anyone uses, so to fix the price. So this could mean draining resources of the European economy towards we don't know where, first thing. Second, resources that should be used instead to provide social support, to provide an acceleration of the energy transformation, or to provide resources for further innovation, so accelerating the next steps. We think that it is important that these decisions are taken at the European level. We think that it is very important to be very respectful of the European context and framework. And we also think, as the Prime Minister of Italy said repeatedly in the last weeks, that paying attention to those that are making much money out of this difference and to consider to what extent this money should be fed back into the households and the families is also an important issue. Otherwise, what we would be witnessing, and this is already a debate in the United Kingdom, is to what extent we introduce some additional taxes on the windfall profits, or how we can bear with something that could be very difficult and not fair for the society that needs to back this transformation.
Okay, thank you. And now the last one. To protect the Spanish companies from unwanted investors, the government has imposed prior approval before authorizing any purchase of shares in strategic sectors such as energy. Do you think that these types of barriers or measures could affect investment in Spain?
Well, I think that what we are trying to be is serious and responsible, and we have had, I could say, a serious and responsible experience with some investors in this sector in the last year. We have the impression that we count on sound companies that are key and that are working for the transformation and taking into consideration that this is a time for investment, so to get profits, but not a time for short-term profits, so to see what happens last. And in this period of time where things have moved so quickly, and the European Union accepted the possibility to pay attention to these exceptional measures as a way to assess to what extent these type of investments are serious, we think that our responsibility is to do so. Not because we want to introduce formal barriers. We are an open economy, I could say one of the most open economies of the world, with companies that are used to adapt, to integrate, to introduce new partners in their shareholders list. But I think that it is also our responsibility to ensure that this happens in a smooth manner, paying attention to what it may mean in the portfolio of investments in such a critical sector in this period of time, paying attention to the impact of workers and employment, paying attention to the general parameters of the economy. And as I say, I think that our experience for the time being has been successfully, and I think, and this is also very important, that the data show that this is the case. I mean, when we see what we have witnessed and what we have been said by the different analysts on this field, and in particular in the field of energy, I think that we can be proud. We have seen to what extent the European institutions have supported and celebrated our strategic documents and planning. But more than that, it's not that they are highly valued by the European Commission or the public institutions. That Bloomberg states that Spain is the third most attractive country in the world to invest in the energy transition. So showing that we are credible, showing that it is consistent what we are providing. And Spain has become the leader in the signing of the long-term contracts, or the PPAs, again, showing that we are a credible and a reliable country, and that people understand that this is a good place to invest. So I think that we not only guarantee a stable regulatory framework, I think that we need to pay attention to the general circumstances, but also to facilitate the investments in the time to come. This is why the combination of the current technologies with the innovations and the investments that we need to develop the next solutions reflected in our birthday, but so on and so on, may attract the interest of the different international investors. And as I say, those willing to be serious investors in the energy transition are very welcome. Those that may have different understanding of what this may mean may find some reluctance from even the economic and social players in Spain, but not only. I think that this is a serious business, and I think that we need serious people willing to commit in this direction.
Well, thank you very much for kindly responding these questions, and thank you very much for assisting again to the Spain Investors Day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to you.